Kabompo district in the home of Mr. Sayila. The date is the 17th of November, 1976. It is now about past 9:30 in the morning. Mr. Sayila.
Mr. Wilkins is in my house and has asked me to tell him about my history and the history of this district. I'm the son of Sayila, who was one of the headmen in this district. I was born about 1913 at Katuba, and have been in this district ever since. In 1934, I came to the first school started at Manyinga and the other places also. I was one of the first students at this school. Also, I was the first Christian to be baptized at that school. From 1934 to 1941, I was at Stocklocky doing my school and then my training. And in 1941, I became one of the first teachers, certificate teachers, for this area. I first of all went to Kamapanda as there was no one to help at Kamapanda Mission Station in Manilunga. That was 1941. I stayed there until 1943. Then I came back to Stocklocky to help. I stayed at Stocklocky from 1943 to 1946 when I went to Charimbana to do my HTC, which they called at that time a teacher's course. I stayed at Charimbana 2 years, after which I came back to Stocklocky to teach 1 year. It was 1948 to 1949. In July 1949, I came to Loloma to head the new upper school which was started there, which is now Loloma A. And when Mrs. Late Sackling died in 1952, the two districts, Zambezi, which is Zambezi now, and Kabompo, they were divided educationally. Two native authorities in Zambezi did their schools separately. The Luwale one was, the Luwale schools were managed by Mr. Mondela, Will Mondela, and the Lunda schools were managed by Mr. Kalufelo. The Manyinga Native Authority in Kabompo asked me to manage the schools. I was the manager of schools in Kabompo, and because of the political difficulties at that time, because there was no one to help the people, I came across a lot of difficulties, and found myself demoted several times. From manager of schools, I became manager's assistant, then manager's representative, then group head teacher, and this time I was at Kabomba School, Kabomba Boma, managing the schools, doing the same job but changing the name to group headmaster. All these schools, except very few schools in Kabombo, were all managed, supervised. The buildings I did, all these schools chose the site, made meetings with the headmen, local people. I did all this until 1961. 1960, I'm sorry. I was asked to go back to teaching. They said because of my ill health, which I suffer from asthma, and I became headmaster of Loloma School again, at this place now. And stayed there only 1 year, 1961. I went to transferred to Kamapanda, Kanwesa School in Mwenilonga. From 1961 to 1964 in December, I was at Kanwesa School. Then in January 1965, I came to Kamapanda. And I stayed at Kamapanda from January 1965 to September 1973 when I retired. I came back to Kabomba because this is my place, and I'm now staying at Loloma, near Loloma A, which I headed as a headmaster, and I'm just settling here.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sayila, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your very interesting story that you've just told us. Is there any particular reason why you went to school? In other words, was your father a Christian who told you to go? Did you run away from home? Or why did you happen to go to school in those early years?
It's difficult to tell why I went to school. My father was not educated, neither was he a Christian. He was just an ordinary man, but a great man in the community. When the school came, I was one of those who were just caught up with the interest. And then it happened, I was at the school. In fact, I was already a big boy when I started in my school. I didn't fail, I went on, although there were difficulties. My father actually didn't even like. He thought I was a lazy boy and always didn't like me to continue. But my mother, I would not remember, I would not forget what she did. She urged me to go on in spite of the difficulties. My many friends, big friends like me, left. Some went to the government, some married, but I kept on until I finished my school.
Very good. Now, do you remember who your first teachers were in those days and what subjects you were studying? Did you have standards or what sort of grades or so forth?
My first teachers were Mr. Jefferson Kadimba, the father, probably you know Mr. Kadimba, so this now, and Mr. Paul Mumbwande. Mr. Kadimba's education at that time, I think he was not even higher than standard 2, and he happened to be the head teacher of the school. His friend, Mr. Mumbwande, I think he was only about standard 1 or even less. They only knew how to read the Bible. In fact, they were evangelists who were sent by the missionaries to help. And they helped us. I happened to be one of the very bright students or scholars in the school. And when Mr. Samuel Mbilishi came to inspect, in fact not inspect, to see the work here was sent by the mission from Chitokoloki, he examined us in December 1935. He found I was doing very well, and I was one of the few in the district recommended to go to Chitokoloki. And in January 1936, just less than 2 years, school at Manyinga, I went to Chitokoloki boarding school, where I did my standard 1, standard 2, and up to standard 4, and then the teacher's training. I could not do standard 6, because this was the first standard 6 to start. As I say, my father was not educated, and I was the only person in the family who had started education, and seeing I had children behind me, my nephews and so on, I started to go to teacher training so that I started working earlier than others, and I became a teacher just after standard 4. I mean, I went for 2 years training. Then I was sent to Kamapanda, as I said. After Kamapanda, when I came back, I found I was not satisfied with the education I had. I had to do standard 6. There also I did very well. I found boys who who had already done standard 5, standard 6A, as they were called at that time, standard 6 up, B, or standard 6 up, or what they call it. We sat together in standard 6, and I was number 2. And then this gave me a place to go to Charimbana for higher teachers course. There I stayed 2 years. I think that's where you went.
Okay, thank you very much. Who were some of your teachers at Chitokoloki? Can you remember any of those when you did your teacher training course?
The Chitokoloki, the teachers were Mr. John Mondela, Mr. Samuel Mbilishi, Mr. Yotam Lohila, Mr. Moses Mbongo. Those were the first standard 4 teachers. At that time, they were the highly educated teachers in the whole district, or say in the province, in fact. And they were our teachers. Mr. Caldwell, one of the missionaries, helped also to teach standard 4, the first standard 4 at Stocklocky. And Mr. Sackling, the father, late Sackling, started standard 5, and those were the teachers. Then Mr. Reed, he was an MA who came, started the teachers training. This training started in 1937, and our group was number 3 in the training. By then, Mr. Galfel was already in the group 2, and Mr. Nkanza and the others were in group 1. So those were the teachers.
Those were the teachers.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now let me just go right on with, by asking you what your school day, when you first started as a young man,
Yes.
what was your school day like? Did it meet the half day? What subjects did you study, and so forth? What languages did they use in the school?
As I said earlier on, the teachers were not well educated. What we had to learn there mainly was scripture, arithmetic, vernacular, which is the Zambia language, and a bit of nature study. Then, because our school was new, we had to, as big boys, myself, one of the big boys, we had to spend most of the day making bricks for our classroom block. At the time I was at school. The whole morning we were out making bricks, and in the afternoon we went into school to do these few lessons.
Now, were you living at home and eating at home, or would you live at the school and the food be provided?
At the first school at Manila, I was at home. My home was about 2.5 miles from the school, and every morning we had to come to school, running every morning and every evening going back going back home. This is where my father didn't like me, because the whole day I was out and I could not help in the family, except Saturdays when I just gave very little help.
Were you the first of your brothers? Were you the only one of his children who was educated then? Am I right?
I was the only educated, the only first one, because I was the last in the family. My brothers were already old at the time they had sons even.
Well, later on, after you did get your education, was your father proud of you then? Did he later forgive you for having eaten his food and not helped in the fields much? Did he later?
Unfortunately, my father did not live up to the time when I ended my education. This I was very sad, because I wanted, if he was alive, I could even say why. When I gave him something, I could say, this is what I was doing. But it was lucky that he went before I finished it. But my mother came to the end, just to the end of my teacher's training. And the first monthly money I got, I bought her a blanket. Then I left her at home, thinking of bringing my dear mother to stay with me. Before I did, she also passed away in 1942.
And she was very proud of you.
Yes, she was very proud.
Well, let me also ask, in Kabumpu area, we've always had the problem of language. Now, at that time, what language were they using at Maninga when you started?
At that time at Maninga, we were using Lunda language. There were so many other schools. Chikonkelo, they used Luvale, Chiengele, Luvale, Chingumbe, Luvale. These were the schools which came together with Maninga. Because at Maninga, the population were mostly Lunda. And even the teacher who was sent here, Kadimba, was Lunda, so we had to live in the Lunda.
Well, in those early days, when you had these few schools scattered around Kabompo, were these under the control of George Suckling, or what agency controlled them?
Yes. The schools, all the schools in the district here, which was Zambia, is part of Baluvale, we were in Baluvale, the district. The schools were controlled by Mr. Suckling. He has the civil mail mission. Yes, all the schools were controlled by him. He was the manager of schools of all the schools.
Well, now let me ask you very specifically about George Suckling. One person I've talked to has very hard opinions of him. He felt that he lived very fancy and was very not a good man. Other people I've talked to feel that he was that the person who brought the best education of all the missionaries. So he obviously was a controversial man. In fact, it appears to me that for some reason Zambezi Kabompo has provided most of the Lunda Valley educated men in Lusaka today. Now, I'd like if you would just comment rather freely on how you felt about him in relation to other missionaries in education.
Yes. Well, Mr. Suckling, in fact, we could call him a father of education. We all owe a lot from him. He has, or he did, a very great job in educating Africans. He sometimes suffered a lot of criticisms from his fellow missionaries. In fact, they wrote back to overseas to say he had left his religious work and that he was educating Africans. The other missionaries in our denomination, male missionaries, did not like the Africans to be educated. Probably they knew to educate the Africans, they would one day rise up and understand their position in the world. So they tried to make difficult things on him, but him, did not mind. He went on, and he was a great man, a man who had a foresighted spirit. He helped us very much, and we all owe a lot to him.
So your impression is very favorable of him in education.
Yes.
Well, now how would you compare? You said you went to Kamapanda and later Kanangesha in Munilunga. How would you compare the education that you saw here in Kabompo, Zambezi, under his control, with what was going on there? Were they much behind at that time?
The first time I went to Kamapanda was 1941. This is when I came from training in Munilunga. The education was very low at the time, and that's why a lot of young men from Munilunga came to Chitokoloki to do their education, because there was very little done in Munilunga. They came to Chitokoloki, and it's difficult actually to compare. Chitokoloki was Zambezi or Kabompo, as we call it now, was not comparable to Munilunga or to any other. It was higher. They had the first education, the first upper schools. In fact, they had the first teachers. They had better education than Mwenilunga, Solezi, Kasempa, and yes, the whole province.
So the people at Kawapanda were not as keen to, not by any means keen,
yeah,
and developed the system.
Yes, because Kamapanda was run by one of those missionaries who were against the education of the Africans.
I'm trying to think now. At Lumwana was Buckland. I'm trying to think of the man at Kawapanda.
Yes.
It's
Mr. Cunningham.
Cunningham, yes.
Yes.
Relation to education, how would someone like Cunningham have felt about the learning of English? Would he have been against this, as sinful, or what?
Yes, he would. I have concrete examples to give. He didn't like at first to send people to go to Stockholm. One of them is Mr. Stanley Tepper. If he went to Menilonga, he asked his name and they will tell him. He was refused permission to go to Stockholm to study higher education. He said what he had learned is enough to read the Bible, that's all. And didn't like people to learn. You have mentioned Mr. Buckland. He was one of the worst missionaries. He didn't even like not only to speak English, he didn't like people to speak English, but even to wear shoes. He was against this. Didn't like people to come in his house with the shoes on their feet.
Yes, what you're saying, I've heard from someone else. That's
Yes,
very interesting that you
yes.
have likewise said the same thing.
Yes.
Now, while we're talking about the missionaries in general, Mr. Suckling was keen on education, as you're saying. Now, how about in other ways? Was he especially keen, or the other missions keen on other kinds of education, such as planting of trees, other sort of a broader type of education?
Yeah.
What was the different feelings of the various mission groups?
Yes. Let me talk about Mr. Suckling again. Mr. Suckling, besides his education, he knew Africans or the Christians would need the independence sometime. So he taught them business. All this business we see in the area in Kabombo, Zambezi and Mwenilunga and so on was his work. He taught them, and the first people to have business were at Chitogolok. And the other missionaries also were against this. They didn't like. He taught them also carpentry work. It was the best carpentry work in the whole province. Even up to now, when you go to Togo, we find carpentry work there is much better than the carpentry work in the other districts. And this also annoyed the other missionaries. He was doing this to help Africans. So when he dies or when they grow, they take their place and they know how to live, not to depend on the Europeans, not to be begging from Europeans. He did. These were some of the things he did, and not only that, he wanted also the welfare of the Africans to be a good one. At some time, the government messengers at the Boma, mistreated the people. They did all evil things, even killing people. And when he heard about it, he made a row about it, and then he went to see the PC when he was called that time, the PC at Mungu, telling him that the people were being beaten, even killed sometimes, because they had not paid taxes, or because they didn't obey the DCs. So this he fought very much, and and he proved it. He won the case. And in fact, all what we have today, we owe Mr. Shackling.
In the last 2 months, you haven't talked to Mr. Chizal that I was coming to interview you, have you? Because you're saying almost identical the same things he did.
No, I didn't even know that I was to be interviewed.
This is fascinating because you're saying you're seconding many things he told me, and it's quite amazing. So what you're saying, it shows that you both agree very much.
Yes.
This is very important indeed. No, let me ask you. Do you mind? Am I making you too tired?
No.
All right. Let me just go on asking you about government. You've mentioned government here very briefly. Government by the 30s and 40s. Would you say that they were keen on encouraging the missions to expand their education, or not? By the 30s and 40s now.
It's difficult to tell. Otherwise, Mr. Shackling would have not started educating. I think they were encouraging, but he was the one trying to urge the government to help him to do this, to help him to educate the Africans. The government at that time did very little. I think he did more on his own. I remember we were in the boarding school more than the government allowed to stay in the boarding school. He paid out of, he bought food and bought clothing for the extra out of his own funds.
Out of his own fund?
Yes. Because we were more than 200, not only in the upper section, but even in the lower section. I said I went to Togolok when I was in third one. That means I was not in the upper section, but was allowed to stay in the boarding, and there were so many of us in the lower section. The government only allowed children to be in the upper section, to be in the boarding school. But because he wanted us to hear the word of God, and he allowed us, seeing most of us were Christians at that time. Yes.
Well, it's very fascinating indeed. Now, let me, just to make a comment for your own interest, in the records I was saying that I'd read a lot of letters about your own. You mentioned Mr. Buckland, and I thought you and Mr. Shumor might like to have both hear this, that Mr. Holmes, you may have remember him as PEO, wrote a letter to the central government saying he was shocked that there was a missionary in the country that he felt was totally antagonistic to Africans learning. And he did not want Mr. Buckland at the one to even have government aid. He said he was against educational.
It's true.
So I've heard some very strong things that you might interest you to see what I've seen. Well, let me ask you now a question, sort of a sensitive question here to Kabompo, but important from the records as far as I can tell, is what influence would you say that the tribal tensions of Kabompo, which is the Lunda, the Vale we've mentioned, and also the Chokwe, the Chazli, and Munda, etc., what influence would you say these tensions from, say, the 40s or 30s, even right on up to independence, have had on education? At one time they even said, let's use English and not have any other language.
Yes.
So could you make a comment on this?
Yes. In fact, the people here, I don't know how, because these people appeared to be the same people, but they have not liked to be together. The Luwale people had put on their side, and the Lunda people put on their side. Mainly these two, the Chok and the Luchazi. The Luchazi also had put on their side. So you find all the time uh, where they see the Lunda people doing something, the Luvale people not like, they would prefer the Luvale doing that thing. Or where you find the Lucha's people doing something, the Luvale would say the same. However, one good thing is that although they do, they talk about it, but in their own homes, in their own villages, they are friends. I think they are friendly. I think this, I could say, the Europeans, not the missionaries, but the Europeans, the government, Europeans, this and so on, brought this because they have this, what they say, divide and rule. This they did to try and divide us. They came and then they found one tribe and then they said, you are very important, you are a very important tribe. Then if you are not careful, you will find yourself defeated by that tribe. And then they go to the other tribe and say, oh, you are very important. And they want to do is the Lunda and the Luval people to fight against each other. Seeing that they were not politically matured, and they had always just took it from the DCs and DOs. Then this has been planted in the minds of the Luval people, especially the old people. Now, this time, I think I advise the young men, both of all the tribes in Kabomba, that they should not look at the tribe. They should look at the quality of someone doing a job. Because if we look at the tribe, we shall be always behind. There may be a Lunda who is weak and who does not know his job, because the people who are in the majority, the Lunda, they choose him to do a job, that the job will not be done properly. There may be a Lugale or a Charles or a Chokwe. If he is just hopeless, but because the people who are in the favor of him or who would like him to be in that particular place, the Choko, the Valley, he would be there to stay just without anything. So the tribe is nothing, but what we want is the quality of someone, the help we get from someone. For example, if we say councillors are put together to talk about the development of the area, and if someone there stays there because he was put there as a tribe only, it would help nothing. It would do nothing.
Right, thank you. Now, in the same connection, how would you say, it seems as if the Lundas and Lavales in Zambezi, what's Zambezi district now, agreed in 1942, I believe, or early 40s, that they must be divided from Baratsi rule. That they were in sort of agreement. This is one place where they agreed.
Yes.
Would you say the Kabampo people, all groups were in agreement as well, that they must, this division should take place?
In fact, we were together, the same district, where, as I said, it was Zambezi. So, when we say they agreed, we are including even the people in Kabombo.
You're including them as well, right?
But only one additional point I would put there is that the district, the Zambezi district only ended in Maninga here, this river we see at the time. Because the other side, where Loloma B and Loloma C or Loloma Mission, that time was in Manilunga district. The other side of the Kabombo Bridge The other side there was Kasempa district. So by 1947, the district Kabompo was founded or separated from Balvale, which was called at the time. And then they took a bit from Munilunga, then a bit from Kasempa, and a bit from Kalomo, which was Mankoya, to make it become Kabompo. So Kabompo, we are saying now Kabompo, we are only half this. Southern Kabompo was in Zambezi, and then the eastern, northern, and the western, southwestern was in Mankoya, the eastern was in Kasempa. Yes.
Thank you very much. That makes it a lot clearer. I can't think of anything else right now that I wanted to ask you. I think you've answered everything so very well. I'll probably think of things later, and you probably will as well. But have you thought of anything else you'd like to? Mr. Shmo, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Mr. Sayila, you have told us that the education that time was managed by the missionaries. Can you try to tell us whether it only wanted those who were Christian children to go to school?
No, I wouldn't cheat, Mr. Shmo. The children who were in the school, the bigger number were non-Christians, and they from non-Christian homes. But the missionaries wanted very much to see the children in school were converted, or they knew the word of God. This is what was at the back of their mind. They always wanted the children to come first and they taught the word of God, but not to say you should be a Christian. No, and many children who were in school were not Christians.
All right, thank you very much. Now, would you like to make a comment on the education of in the post-independent period, and whether it's closer to the people now, the people feel more in touch with it, and so forth?
This time, we are very, very thankful. We are even telling our children that they are very lucky. They are very lucky in this way that they have the education facilities near them. For example, in our time, we used to, the only upper school was Chitokoloke, as I say. So the people from Manilunga were to walk on foot from Kalenge, from the whole of Manilunga, coming, passing through here to go to Manilunga. There was no transport at that time, there were no roads. And people from Kasempa, Mutinga and Mutanda used to come. Then they were a bit lucky. There was one road there, and the transport was very bad. A certain trader named Mr. Duncan Chula had started the business there, road services. He had no bus, had a lorry, and only that lorry, he had to put some fish and the people together sitting in that lorry, bringing things from the coal belt and bringing people from the coal belt. So the Kasemba people were a bit like, although the transport was not good, but in Manilunga, the Kabombo people, we had to walk from here to Stokolok. It took us several days carrying food on our shoulders. And that's one thing. And another thing also, the only secondary school
during my time, during my end of time in education, the only secondary school was in Atamunale. The whole Zambia was only one. So it was very difficult for people to find the places. Very, very difficult indeed. And this time now, we are very lucky. Although we are still complaining that it's not enough, I know always when one gets something, is not, you will not say I have got too much, you would like something also to be added. But we are much better off than before. We have education, many upper schools, and then many secondary schools in the province. Each province has got, each district has got a secondary school, which runs up to Form 5. We are very fortunate indeed.
Well, would you say that the people feel also more free to come to the school and make comments on how to improve?
You mean this time?
Yes, in relation to the school, do they feel that the school is more there?
Yes, this time many people. That's why you find somewhere when a teacher has not taught well, when their children fail to qualify for Form 1, they make a row. I remember at Kaleng in Lights, a few years ago, the teachers were beaten after the examination after seeing that only very few children were selected. People were very, very keen. People like their children to go to school. Even the children themselves know that the only thing they could do in their life is to be educated. They have seen it because when they go to the compound, they find their friends with the same age are enjoying the educational fruits. So they are working in the offices and so on. And I would also even add on that the education of girls at our time was not as we see today. People preferred to send their boys to school than the girls. The number of girls were very, very few in the schools compared to the number of boys, because they thought a girl was useless. This is the custom of the people here. A woman was taken to be low. The woman was not regarded as anything. So